Hey there, 7th graders. Welcome to this explainer on the St. Paul Middle School American History curriculum. Today, we're basically framing our entire course as one huge complex story, the story of how a nation built its identity literally from the ground up. Everything we're going to cover here is the essential foundation you need for your upcoming Unit 6, Lesson 4 American Identity mini-project. So consider this your ultimate guide to understanding the really deep and, honestly, sometimes messy roots of the country we live in today. Let's get right into it.
Okay, here's our roadmap for today. We've got 1. Mapping your history course. 2. Unit 1, Colonization and Conflict. 3. Myth versus historical evidence. 4. Unit 3, American Identity. 5. Expansion, Reform, and Division. And finally, 6. The Journey Ahead.
All right, starting right at the top with Section 1, Mapping your history course.
So first off, we really need to wrap our heads around the massive 11-unit journey this entire course covers, stretching all the way from prehistoric North America into a completely new century. Let's do a quick student check right here. Just think about how much intense history is packed into just these first 14 weeks. Imagine actually living through that kind of rapid change. We're going to zoom in on how a series of early conflicts and compromises actually forged our national identity. We spend 3 weeks on colonization, 4 on the revolution, 4 on forming our identity, and 3 weeks leading directly into civil conflict. And remember, every single week builds powerfully on the last to get you ready to form a reasoned conclusion for your project.
Moving right along to Section 2, Unit 1, Colonization and Conflict.
So this is where we spend our first 3 weeks, and I want you to think about this focused, essential question. How did colonization create both new opportunities and deep conflicts? Now, a really common misconception is that early America was just this empty, vast land waiting to be peacefully farmed. But to really nail your project's perspective analysis, we have to balance the creation of a new, growing society with the devastating struggles and pain it caused for indigenous people. It was never just one or the other, right? It was always both.
When early Europeans arrived, they didn't just step onto a blank slate. They completely collided with complex, already established societies in prehistoric North America. That collision totally disrupted Native American life. From there, early colonial development brought these drastic cultural shifts in religion, rationality, and piety as settlers tried to build a so-called New World. But this New World was built on entirely new and often brutal economic systems. This profoundly shaped the trajectory of the nation through the horrifying implementation of transatlantic slavery. So, as you can clearly see, these aren't just isolated topics. They are a complex web of colliding forces. And that brings us directly to a crucial skill you'll need for your mini project, Section 3, Myth versus Historical Evidence. You know, we often grow up hearing these simplified, comforting stories about the past, but for your American Identity mini project, you really need to look past that. You're going to learn to challenge those comforting myths by analyzing real primary historical accounts. You have to look at the hard source evidence, even when it's super uncomfortable, to uncover the actual truth of how this country formed.
Facing historical evidence head-on is really the only way we truly understand how this country was built. Let's lock in some key vocabulary here. Transatlantic slavery was the forced transportation of enslaved African people across the Atlantic Ocean. It is absolutely critical to realize this wasn't just some accident or a tiny footnote in a textbook. It was a core, foundational part of early colonial economic systems. Connecting brutal realities like this directly to the nation's early wealth is exactly the kind of evidence-based analysis a top-tier project requires.
All right, next up is Section 4, Unit 3, American Identity.
So by Unit 3, the nation is officially formed, but this massive question still remains. What does it actually mean to be American? How did the United States define itself while it was expanding and dividing? This really forces us to ask how a brand new country can try to build one unified shared identity while it's simultaneously splitting apart at the seams over major political and social issues.
One of the very first places we see this intense division is in politics. We're going to compare early political parties, specifically the Federalists versus the Republicans. These are key vocabulary terms you'll definitely want to weave into your project. You'll see how early Americans completely disagreed on how the government should actually operate. Should it be a strong central power, like the Federalists wanted, or should individual states have more control, like the Republicans argued? Honestly, sound familiar? These early arguments laid the exact groundwork for the political debates we are still having today.
But, of course, politics wasn't the only thing changing. Let's hit Section 5, Expansion, Reform, and Division. As the young nation grew, these big new ideas fueled both massive physical expansion and intense social reform movements. One of the absolute biggest ideas was manifest destiny. This is another crucial piece of key vocabulary. It was the 19th century belief that U.S. expansion throughout the American continents was entirely justified and totally inevitable. Now, evaluating manifest destiny helps us understand the intense motivation for Western growth, but we have to look at the conflict too. Specifically, the devastating displacement and destruction of Native American life that came right alongside that relentless expansion. This creates what is basically the ultimate conceptual battle of early America. On one side, you've got nationalism. These are the forces, pride, and systems trying to unite the whole country into a single powerhouse. On the completely opposite side, you have sectionalism. Forces and loyalties dividing the country into distinct, stubborn regions, like the North and the South, which usually clashed over major issues like the economy and slavery. It's this constant, incredibly tense tug of war between national pride and regional loyalty.
By the end of this incredibly rich unit, you'll need to demonstrate some specific project success criteria. An awesome project model will confidently compare those early political parties, fully explain that tense tug of war between nationalism and sectionalism, analyze the massive social reform movements, and critically evaluate manifest destiny. Conquering these exact goals and weaving them into a cohesive narrative proves you truly understand the complex, deeply woven fabric of the new American identity. Finally, that brings us to Section 6, the journey ahead. Mastering these early units isn't just about getting a good grade. It sets the stage for the climax of our history. Right after this era of expansion, we transition into a terrifying boiling point. The sectionalism we just talked about becomes way too intense. The compromises completely stop working, and the differences between the regions just become too great to ignore. Here's a pretty surprising fact for you. It took less than a single human lifetime for the United States to go from writing a unifying constitution to actively fighting each other on massive battlefields in a devastating civil war. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. How will the intense sectional divisions and rapid expansion we've unpacked today inevitably ignite that brutal civil war? Consider how the very identity we spent weeks building threatened to completely tear the entire nation apart. As you build the reasoned conclusion for your American Identity mini-project, keep that powerful tension front and center. It's an incredible, dramatic story, and you now have the ultimate roadmap and the exact criteria to navigate it. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, 7th graders. Now go build an amazing project.